Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, and I'm back to bring you another episode review from the Loud House. But not just any episode. Today, we will be looking at not only the final episode from Season 9, but also the first installment of the Summer Camp arc. Unlike the rest of the world who got the actual first episode, Crystal Ballin', as the Season 9 premiere, the American audience was treated to the 22-minute finale as the official premiere to Season 9. I'm not sure why Nickelodeon USA decided to skip all the way to the end of the season instead of starting at the beginning like every other country, and to be honest, I wish they had held off on the summer camp arc until next year. Canonically, it would have made more sense to get through all the preceding episodes of Season 9 before moving on to an episode that serves as a part 1 to a 3-part story arc that carries over into Season 10. That's what I would have done for the sake of consistency, but hey, it is what it is. Anyway, enough rambling, let's get right into the review of both the first episode of the summer camp arc and the final episode to Season 9 of the Loud House. Today's summer camp episode is Ticked Off. In this episode, the Loud family and Clyde head to Camp Mastodon for the summer, and Lincoln and Clyde and their 2 bunkmates grow fed up with some bullies making their experience less than enjoyable. Even though this is officially considered the Season 9 finale, this episode feels like it should have been held off until Season 10. The story makes you feel like you're watching the first episode of a new season, but I digress. The best thing I can say about this episode is that it felt both relatable and very down to earth in its writing. Compared to other episodes where fantasy elements like magic and ghosts were essential to the plot, this episode felt a lot more realistic in how the story got from point A to B. Yes, there are some zany, cartoony moments the characters experience, but the bulk of the story wasn't weighed down with so many fantasy elements as a means of pushing the story forward. The main storyline with Lincoln and Clyde took the simple childhood experience of going to summer camp and having the younger characters come face to face with some older kids who think they run the place and have power over the other campers, which in this case they pretty much do. All of this may sound very bland, simple, and cliche on the surface, but the story made great use of the typical little kids versus bullies premise. I mean, you want to talk about the series needing to return to its original slice of life grounded in reality format? This story seemed firmly grounded to me. Anyway, this episode is composed of 3 different plots, so I'll start this section of the review by talking about the main one focusing on Lincoln and Clyde. Their story begins when they meet 2 fellow campers in their assigned bunkhouse called the Ticks. These 2 kids are named Marshall and Iggy. Just like Lincoln and Clyde, these 2 are also big fans of rip hardcore, and that's pretty much all there is to say about them. They're fine for 2 characters who are only ever going to appear in this summer camp arc, and they do have their little humorous moments, so no complaints from me. Soon Lincoln encounters some older kids from the saber-toothed tiger bunk, and Marshall and Iggy explain how those kids are known as the kings of the camp. A few years ago, one of the Tigers won a series of challenges known as the Mastodon Marathon, and his win proved that he was the toughest camper. As a result, the Tigers get special privileges and private access to pretty much everything, which includes hoarding all the bug spray, sunscreen, and hot water for showers. Originally, I thought this only applied to the boys' side of the camp because we never find out if anyone from the girls' side is forced to endure a similar situation. But near the end of the episode, some of the girls looked very uneasy when the Tigers were initially declared the winners of the Rip Hardcore Survival Challenge, which would imply these boys were also making the camp experience very uncomfortable for them as well. A bunch of teenage boys low-key bullying little girls? Oh yeah, sure, that makes you look like a real tough guy. Either way, being kings of the camp is a time-honored tradition created by the campers, and not even the adult counselors know about it. Which is weird because you would think the adults would have caught wind of this subtle form of bullying at some point in Camp Mastodon's history. Seriously, none of the adults realized a bunch of campers rigged the pipework to make sure no one else had access to hot water? Either these counselors are super oblivious to what's going on, or maybe they do know what's going on with the other campers but won't do anything about it. Just like real life. Regardless, all the campers are afraid to speak up out of fear of being labeled a squealer, not to mention possibly getting beaten up by the older kids, but Lincoln won't stand for this morally corrupt system any longer. He invokes the Mastodon Marathon and goes one-on-one with Jack Lumber, the tiger who won the special privileges for his bunkmates all those years ago. Unfortunately, Lincoln loses every single challenge and the Tigers retain their status as kings of the camp. Even though Jack is a bully and acts like a complete jerk, I gotta give the kid credit for being able to clean sweep the entire marathon. He had both the skills and endurance to undertake every challenge, some being a little more disgusting than others. He won very easily while Lincoln struggled every step of the way. Not to say this justifies Jack's behavior and how he and his bunkmates treat the other campers, but I can see why he earned all those special privileges. It's not too often you hear me singing the praises of an antagonist who technically earned the right to have first dibs at practically everything, but here we are. Anyway, not wanting to accept defeat, Lincoln gets the idea to challenge the Tigers to a rematch, but this time in the form of a rip hardcore survival game. The rules are pretty simple. The first team to find their way back to the campground for the first campfire of the season wins the competition. However, no one is allowed to use electronic navigation devices, and any form of trickery that breaches the camp's code of honor will result in a disqualification. In other words, both teams have to play fair, just like they did in the original Mastodon Marathon. How Patrick, the competition coordinator, was going to keep track of both teams to make sure no one cheated is never explained, since we never see him actually following either the Ticks or the Tigers. If he had, he would have witnessed firsthand what was going on during the boat race, but I'll get back to that part soon enough. Lincoln's team also faces the added stipulation that if they lose, the Tigers gain access to their bunkhouse and the Ticks will have to sleep outside for the rest of the summer. Lincoln's teammates use Clyde's Rip Hardcore survival tip calendar to navigate their way back to camp, and this entire montage was my favorite part of the episode. It combined elements from previous episodes like Roughing It and Mall of Duty. The boys used certain survival techniques to avoid impending danger, move large heavy objects, and safely make their way back to camp. To paraphrase the episode Mountain Hard Pass, they were using what nature provided to their advantage, and they were making great strides. I also liked how this montage had a few payoffs to a few setups from earlier. Remember when Iggy was showing off his wooden recorder at the beginning of the episode? When he and his friends ran into some deadly snakes, he used that same instrument to charm them, and the snakes formed a staircase so the boys could climb out of the gully they fell into. Who would have thought the bingo song could come in handy for a situation such as this? There was also the part at the beginning where the Ticks said underpants could be used as a boat sail, and that's exactly what they used to catch up to the Tigers when their boats were racing along the river. It may have been very gross. It also may have been very convenient that there was a strong enough breeze that could make one boat travel faster than another boat that was being driven by much more powerful kids using traditional wooden paddles. Either way, the Ticks literally had the wind at their backs and they were on the verge of claiming a fair and square victory. However, their boat began taking on water and everyone was forced to abandon ship, thus guaranteeing a victory for the Tigers. But before I talk about what happened next, I first have to talk about the two subplots of the episode because they're connected to the main storyline, one of them being more significant than the other. The first subplot is about Lola dreading the idea of spending the entire summer at Camp Mastodon. She hates the less than ideal quality of her bunkhouse, she hates the fact there's no water softener for her hair, and she refuses to have fun with Lana and their two bunkmates. Feeling very dissatisfied with her surroundings, she decides to have a few things delivered to her bunkhouse to make her experience less campy and more luxurious. However, some packages get lost in transit when they cross paths with the Ticks and Tigers during both the Mastodon Marathon and the Rip Hardcore Survival Challenge. This plot point becomes relevant later during the second half of the story. Lola even has her personal nail technician show up as well. Everything Lola says and does in this episode perfectly aligns with her character. Of course she would have a bunch of drones delivering a bunch of fancy things to a summer camp if it meant maintaining the glamorous lifestyle she feels entitled to. In her own words, she's not really a camper, and there have been plenty of past episodes showing her out in the wilderness and hating the idea of being far away from the things that make her feel comfortable and fabulous. Despite her negative attitude, Lola indirectly helps her brother win the Rip Hardcore Survival Challenge by exposing the shady behavior committed by the Tigers. One of the delivery drones crashed en route to Lola's destination and landed near the river where the boat challenge was taking place. When she requested to see the video footage to verify if her package was indeed delivered to her location, the drone camera showed Jack putting a hole in the other team's boat while the Ticks were preparing the sails, if you know what I mean. As a result, the Tigers are disqualified and the Ticks become the new kings of the camp. However, Lincoln rejects the praise from the other campers, saying he knows what it's like to be treated like a second-class citizen. He doesn't want to subject anyone to the same unfair treatment he and everyone else had to endure when the Tigers were the ones claiming ownership of everything. He declares that there will be no more kings of the camp going forward, and everyone will be treated equally from now on. As expected, Jack apologizes for his earlier behavior, and he and the rest of the Tigers make peace with the Ticks, and everyone becomes friends. As predictable of an ending as it is, I still think it was a nice way to bring the main story to a close. It's clear Jack grew to respect Lincoln, and let's be honest, you can't really say you're that tough if you feel the need to cheat during a boat race when you didn't have to cheat at all in the original Mastodon Marathon. Lincoln competed in the Rip Hardcore Survival Challenge with integrity, while Jack did not. It's always good having the antagonist see the error of his ways after being exposed as a cheater and recognizing that he's not as cool as he thought he was. And finally, there's the subplot with Lynn Sr. working as the camp cook. he meets a sweet little girl named Emily, who just so happens to work for the Camp Mastodon newspaper, with Rita obviously serving as the editor. Emily leaves a critical, yet very articulated review of Lynn Sr.'s cooking, and this drives the man crazy. Mr. Loud is so mad about this little kid not being in love with his food that he is hell-bent on trying to make Emily write a more positive review. It even got to the point where he thought destroying the newspaper printing press with marshmallows was the best way to stop all the negative feedback. This man seriously lost his mind all because he thought a 7-year-old girl working for a camp newspaper was going to damage his reputation as a chef. It's as if the episode The Taunting Hour never happened. You know, the episode where everyone learns it's best to ignore the haters and all the mean things they say about their individual professions. It does look stupid to see a grown man overreacting to negative comments a little kid is making about his cooking. And yet, I find it absolutely hilarious how far Lynn Sr. was willing to go just to protect his own ego. In the end, after hearing Lincoln's speech about wanting to be the better person, the dad decides to abandon his grudge against Emily and reconsider his earlier actions. Surprisingly, Emily gives a very positive review about Lynn Sr.'s banana-flavored s'mores, and of course the dad is overcome with happiness when he hears this. As much as I adored Emily's character and very much enjoyed seeing Mr. Loud go completely insane about getting a review rating of 1 tusk out of 5, this entire subplot seemed pretty pointless in the grand scheme of things. It could have been removed from the episode completely and nothing would have changed. Lola's subplot with the delivery drones, on the other hand, was more integral to the main story. Even so, I have to admit that the ending of her little subplot was kinda underwhelming. She doesn't really learn to appreciate the outdoor environment of Camp Mastodon. She said camp isn't so bad so long as you have the right gear, but the problem with what she's saying is that she's not really roughing it by the end of the episode. Lola is never once seen making the attempt to adjust to her new surroundings without her usual comforts and conveniences. The final scene shows her sitting on a big comfy princess chair as Winona continues painting her nails. It's true Lola wasn't as negative as she was in the beginning, but the way she's presented during those final few seconds isn't exactly a good sign of storyline character development either. Overall, this episode was both a pretty good season finale and a pretty good starting point for the summer camp arc. Lincoln and Clyde's 2 new friends had a decent introduction, the multiple competitions between the ticks and tigers were very engaging, and the story felt like it was directly inspired by one's childhood. Lola's subplot was fine and it had relevance to the main story, but it would have been better if she was shown adapting to the camp lifestyle and gradually moving away from her usual comfort items. Lynn Sr.'s subplot was funny and Emily's performance was simply adorable, but as I said, this entire subplot could have been removed since it had no major impact on the main story with Lincoln and his friends. In terms of being the first installment of a multi-episode story arc, I can say with confidence that this episode is my favorite. It's only a little better than Bizarratorium from Season 7, and it's way better than A Night to Remember from Season 8. This sets the tone for the adventures at Camp Mastodon going forward, and we'll see what the arc has in store for the characters starting in Season 10. With that said, I give Ticked Off an 8.5 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Ticked Off. Normally this would be the part of the video where I would ask you guys what your favorite episode was from Season 9. But considering this is the first review of the season I'm releasing publicly, and the remaining episodes have yet to be aired on television, even more so in the United States, that particular question will have to wait for another day. But in the meantime, I might as well ask, what did you guys think of the first episode of the summer camp arc? Sound off in the comments below, and be sure to click that subscribe button for more Loud House related content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.